it's probably going to end in failure, because it always does, because I'm a failure.
I think we're spiraling a bit here. Are you okay, Char?
Welcome to the Plotcast. I'm your host, Char from the Plottery. I'll help you plant little but mighty seeds of motivation so you can watch your ideas grow into beautiful, beautiful novels. Welcome back to the Plotcast. I'm here with Kai.
Hi, I'm Kai.
Hi, Kai. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, a little bit of context as to why you're even on the podcast?
I don't know why I'm on the podcast.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You came up with the name, so
yes,
here we go.
I also came up with the name, the Plottery, so
You did.
yeah, still waiting for that check, but it's fine.
Well, you know what? I didn't sign a contract, so
Yeah, I guess so. So let there be a warning, guys. Always get everything in writing before you do business with Char.
yeah.
She will.
I second that. I second that.
Yeah. She went to Taylor Swift School of Business.
Exactly.
So I'm Kai. I've been friends with Char for a decade now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, insane, right? And I studied film and TV production at AIU in Cambridge, and I graduated last year. And now I live and work in London in film distribution. We take mostly English Hollywood films and then do all the dubbing and subbing and prepare them for the releases in theatres and stuff like that, and TV shows a bit. I guess I work in film, and that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Yeah, so you work in post-production in the film industry, which is pretty neat. What about your writing? What is your history with writing?
So that's kind of the end goal. I would like to work in development, so kind of pre-production. I'm kind of trying to weasel my way through the spectrum. Although I guess I am. That's you. That was a dog. Not me.
Oh, bless you, Lavender.
So I guess although I am in the industry, I'm kind of the wrong side of the spectrum. But yes, to go back to your actual question, I'm kind of a screenwriter. I've written a few short films, which I've also produced / directed and
/ done everything.
/ done everything, but also just hand over. I've written stuff that other people have then turned into short films, which is also quite interesting because you kind of see the interpretation of your writing, which is, for better or for worse, quite the experience. Sometimes they add value to the story. Sometimes they make decisions, say a bit like, really? That's where we're going? Okay, interesting. But one way or another, it's kind of, it's cool. It's a cool experience. And yes, I like to write.
But yeah, I was gonna say it's one of the bigger differences in novel writing and writing for screen, because you have to actually work with a team when you are doing film and screenwriting and stuff. And I think that's like unfathomable for most authors that I know. Anyway, it's very difficult to let other people influence your choices and decisions. And I think that's why so many writers struggle with editing and development and second drafts. But that's probably a topic for another podcast. I guess today we're talking about show don't tell and how that translates from screenwriting to novel writing. What are because we haven't actually discussed the topic. We were just kind of going in blind. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are on show don't tell. What do you think it is? How do you think that rule applies to screenwriting or novel writing, whatever you want?
Oh, it's like a pop quiz.
I know. Like you're back in school.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the most literal sense, it's just to show things rather than explaining them to the audience, which I do think surprisingly, a big amount of screenwriters and novelists, I suppose, struggle with that, especially when it comes to, I think, fantasy or anything that needs world building, because obviously that requires a lot of context for the audience. So how do you bring that context across without bluntly telling them everything they need to know? That's, I guess, also why a lot of films have the new character, the new girl at school, so you can just tell them everything they need to know, and it seems a bit more natural. I think it's always a nice trope to have.
We were actually taught in university that trope. They were like, oh, if you ever struggle with explaining anything, you just put a newbie character on the cast, and then they can ask all the questions that the audience needs to know.
Exactly. Who's that group over there? Those are the clients.
There's a little trick if you are writing fantasy and you're struggling with the world building. It's not the greatest storytelling trope, but it works. So yeah, why not? But I do agree, like fantasy and dystopian worlds and like anything where you're building a new world is definitely like more difficult um to utilize that advice. But I wouldn't just limit it to fantasy. I feel like it's more excusable for fantasy because like I feel like it's, you know, it's obviously more difficult, but I do see that in plenty of both films and novels where it's I don't want to risk sounding judgmental, but like YA stuff is very often pretty tell rather than show, and I think also when you go into like younger audiences as well, it does tend to be more tell rather than show, because it's, I guess the whole concept of show don't tell is letting your audience deduce things, and obviously the younger the audience, the more difficult it is for them to deduce things. So you would think like, you know, more complex worlds, more complex stories will be for older audiences, I guess.
I think it's also kind of the issue most people have with Saltburn, at least the people I talk to. Mm-hmm. Have you seen Saltburn?
Saltburn, of course I have seen Saltburn.
Okay. Just spoiler alert if you haven't seen Saltburn. I'm sorry. But yeah, the revelation in the end, right, when it turns out that Oliver was like the mastermind who orchestrated everything, and it's just a way that I think everyone already knew that, and then it just go above and beyond to give you all the flashbacks to literally hammer it home. Bestie, it was him. He is evil. It's like, oh Christ, really? What? Gosh, no. I never thought. Which I think is kind of what ruined it for. Not ruined it, but you know, the biggest criticism people have given is that that's kind of you just feel a bit patronized.
Yeah, like we got it. We were there. We saw it.
Yeah,
we
thanks,
got it.
Emerald. Thank you. Thank you so much for telling me that.
I totally get that. I feel like I've seen several things, several shows and films that did that actually, where it was just like, oh, here's a flashback to that integral part a couple of episodes ago that, you know, I want to make sure that you didn't miss that. Did you get that? Like, did you get it? Yeah, it's like, I don't know, they'll find like a ring in episode 2, and then in episode 4 that ring will become important, and then they'll do like the quickest flashback to the ring in episode 2, and I'm like, I got it, like I remember it, it's fine. But yeah, I think that pops up in novel writing as well, so it's not just like screenwriting. And I think that's probably the interesting part of this topic, is that people think because you're writing a novel you get to tell, like you get to you get away with basically just like telling your audience whatever you want because you have so many words to use at your disposal. But I think that's where this advice is sort of taken the wrong way, because even with novel writing, like, yes, you can give a bit more context, I think, when, you know, I don't know, something comes up in dialogue and then your narrative character is going to be like, oh yeah, that's blah, 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 and give you a little bit more information about it. But I do think like a lot of authors take that way too far, and then you get repetition, and then you get like the same thing as you would get with like looking back at the ring in episode 2. You get like the author literally will say, that must be why back in blah, 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 he did this. And I'm like, no, you don't need that. We know. We were there. We read that. I do think it's a little bit more difficult because obviously with books, and some people who read books over a course of a year.
I don't know what you're talking about. Don't look at me.
They might need a reminder, but you know, some of us actually finish a book within a reasonable amount of time, so we might actually remember.
I feel years really reasonable. Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah, of course. Right, okay, well, I guess we have a question as to why it is important to show rather than tell, but I guess we kind of already dabbled in that, and it's, I guess, not dumbing things down for your readers or your audience.
Yeah, I think it's just A, patronizing, and B, just boring.
Yeah,
it just takes the fun out of it, because no one wants to be called dumb, which is essentially what you do. Every time you feel the need to go above and beyond and like spell things out for the audience, you're kind of saying, I didn't think you would get it otherwise. Yeah. Like, I think you needed this explained again, which is like, no one likes that feeling. Yeah. Or maybe I'm just a snob, but I feel like no one likes that feeling. So yeah, you're just underestimating your audience, which I think you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And even if they don't get it, well, tough luck.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people forget that, and especially these days when like writing is kind of becoming like fast fashion. But a lot of people forget that writing is supposed to be an art, and it's supposed to be like, plotting things out. You're the mastermind. You're not just sitting there and explaining to someone your synopsis and everything that happens and everything the character feels. You're giving them a slice of life, of someone else's life, preferably, your protagonist, your narrator, whatever. And then you're letting your audience deduce what happened and deduce what you meant to say, what the author meant to say. But yeah, I think like now we're sort of strolling into territory where people just write for the sake of selling things, obviously, but also just for the sake of like telling stories, but not actually getting into, I guess just because I feel like, okay, I'm trying to say that writing is supposed to be like a craft. It's not easy. It's not like, here, let me tell you a story of what happened yesterday and of what this dude did, and here's exactly how I perceived it, and here's exactly the point of the story. But you're trying to create entertainment for someone, so that it's supposed to be you creating something that's going to be entertaining and stimulating for an audience, and not just like talking to your friend and telling them what happened yesterday. Like, that's all due respect, but that's probably boring.
I'm not even that, but like, even I think actually thinking about it, like you're talking to your friend might actually help, because you wouldn't give your friend every single detail either, right? Because you would assume your friends know you a bit, they know the people in your life, they know a bit of the context. So if I tell you about, I don't know, what my family did last Tuesday, that kind of mildly upset me, or I just thought was funny, let's not everything needs to be depressing. I wouldn't give you the entire rundown of, the biography, or like why this is funny because it relates to another event that happened 5 years ago. Like, you would kind of,
because I would have the context.
Exactly.
Of it, yeah.
So I feel like sometimes you need to trust your audience that they actually remember the context that you gave 5 chapters or 5 episodes, whatever, maybe earlier.
Yeah, and I think that leads me to like that classic example of show don't tell in dialogue, specifically when people are like, oh, because I'm not telling them anything while I'm writing the description, so I will just use the dialogue to relay the information. And then you end up with dialogue like, hey, Thomas, this is my sister Annalise. Would you like to come to the cinema with my sister Annalise? Like,
hey, sister. Hey, bro.
Even though Thomas and this person have probably known each other for like 10 years. It's like, why would you say it's your sister?
My biggest pet peeve is when people say, remember?
And then you know that exposition is following.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 times people don't say remember in real life. You wouldn't say, oh, we're not talking remember?
That time when...
Remember, I'm mad at her. Like, what? Who talks like that?
Remember she did this? Oh, yeah.
Oh, the life-changing thing that happened? Oh, yeah, I remember.
I nearly forgot.
Remember he cheated on me with a best friend? Oh, yes, thank you. It's almost slipped my mind.
What are the differences between showing versus telling in novels versus screenwriting?
You have more opportunities to hide things from your audience in the visual format, because you can have things in the background without actually, pointing your audience's attention towards it. You can just have it linger in the corner as a clue, and the people who will find it or get it will get it, and the people who don't, well, maybe someone else will point out to them. Whereas in a novel, everything needs to be spelled out to some extent, so I guess it's a bit harder to allude to things.
Yeah, because see, what you're saying makes me think of Mike Flanagan and how he, in all of his like series, he usually hides stuff in the sort of like the background of his panels. If you were writing that in a novel, you can't, like, there's no way to allude to that. If you want to spell it out, you have to spell it out.
Yeah, kind of.
And it will be there. I think Chekhov's gun works all right if you do sort of intersperse it with other stuff, or if it's like comes up naturally, but it's just pointed out enough for some readers to pick up on it, because I think like not everyone's ever going to pick up on things like that, but if this is what you do for a living, you'll usually pick up on things like that. And that's why I always cut out unnecessary description, because I have been editing this manuscript recently, and the girl has a tendency to describe things a lot, but most of the time, like not most of the time, but some of the time I was like, I need to cut this. And then I would read and I would keep reading, and like the next chapter, that thing would become important, and I would be like, oh crap, I need to go back and put that in. That was actually important. So yeah, it really does depend on like the purpose behind what you're describing and what you're putting in a novel. There are ways to do it in a novel too, but yeah, I guess in screenwriting it does come a little bit easier to show rather than tell, and then in novel writing it's easier to tell rather than show.
Yes. Then again, the other, I think, issue is that screenwriting is a lot more dialogue heavy, or at least like the actual watching the film is a lot more dialogue heavy. So the temptation of literally telling the
everything
audience,
in
I guess,
dialogue
is higher or bigger than for a novel, because you could just put everything in the description, right? You have the description on the script, but your audience will never read the script.
Yeah.
So yeah, things like, this is my best friend Becky, we've known each other for 10 years. You can have that as a description in a novel and it wouldn't seem too jarring, but if a character actually said that in a film, that would be very much telling and not showing.
Yeah, definitely. That I do think it's a lot harder to write a screenplay than people think it is, because you are very limited in what you can actually say, and everything that you do, like literally every word that you put down in a screenplay needs to matter. Like it needs to be leaning somewhere, and it needs to have a purpose, and it needs to be showing you something. And the badly written screenplays are those that will be doing the telling and be having like on the nose dialogue, and like everyone will be psychoanalyzing themselves and saying exactly what they feel. And
people don't talk about the feelings usually. Yes, even if they want to talk about people are notoriously bad at
expressing anything,
their emotion,
that they feel.
like what they mean. So to all my fellow screenwriters out there, that's a little trick that you probably are aware of. Yeah, people just usually don't go about and be like, I am really upset because you did this and that. People should be doing that, but
yeah, it would be a great world if people did that.
Yes, but people don't do that. So I guess a rule of thumb is always let your character say the opposite of what they actually are doing. So if someone is upset, they will say, I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because that's what people do.
Exactly.
They're petty and passive aggressive.
Exactly. Passive aggression is like the number one tool to master for any writer if you want to write good dialogue, because I feel like you're always going to have characters that are going to be like that, because there's so many humans that are like that. I grew up around that, so I know. But it's always like, you know, when like the mom gets mad and then she goes into the kitchen and she mutters, I always do everything by myself. Yeah. And like you could take that literally and like that sort of chatter and be like, oh, okay, so she's okay, she's fine doing everything on her own, but really she is not. It's the exact opposite.
I think Lady Bird is a great film, like an example for that. Have you seen the film?
Is that the thing you watched the other night?
Yes.
Yeah, with
Greta Gerwig.
Saoirse Ronan.
She wrote it. Yeah, Saoirse Ronan, Timothée Chalamet, and I forgot the name of the mother, but she's also a famous actress.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, it's a very complicated relationship between Lady Bird and her mother. And I loved it because there also a lot of, passive aggressive tension, because you can tell the mother does love her daughter, but she has extremely high standards, I suppose. I guess she's a little bit disappointed by her daughter. And I feel like that's a very realistic relationship people have with their parents, especially I presume women with like the mothers, also like some with the father. For some reason, the same-sex relation with your parents was a bit tricky.
Yeah.
I guess because a lot of, we call it, like if you self-insertion going on.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is, I think there was one scene that stood out to me when Lady Bird, her name is Christine, but she wants to be called Lady Bird, when she asked her mother something like, why don't you like me? And then she's like, of course I love you. It's like, yeah, but do you like me?
Right. There's a difference.
Like, you didn't say you like me. And then she goes along and says something like, I just want you to be the best version of yourself. And then Lady Bird goes, but what if this is the best version? And there's just silence. And like that silence was so deafening. Nothing was said, but just bestie, I'm sorry about just having her not say anything at all is so much more powerful than if she said anything. Like, no line was the right choice here.
The power of silence.
The power of silence.
That's actually one of the methods I teach in my dialogue writing. And I totally get that. I love that when it's like you just don't need to say anything. But then, some amateur authors or newbie writers would get the temptation, maybe not newbie writers, but like people who aren't that in tune with showing versus telling, they would get the urge then to write something out, to have a response, to have like a reiteration of, oh, she's disappointed in me. She's disappointed in the fact that this is the best that I could do. And I think so, if you were to translate that particular scene that you were talking about into novel writing, and say, for example, that we were writing it from Lady Bird's point of view, you would have to think about like how much does she, if it's her narrative voice, how much does she react to that? How much does she reveal to the audience? Because it could be very simple as to like, she would just acknowledge the silence and leave, and you could interpret that as a reader in her knowing, like realizing, oh, mom's disappointed in me, without her actually having to use internal monologue to say, great, she's disappointed in you. You know, stuff like that. So that kind of brings me to the other side of the spectrum, which is I hear a lot of, I stalk a lot of Facebook groups, and I've probably mentioned this before, but I do stalk a lot of Facebook groups about creative writing and stuff. And whenever anyone asks anything about like the advice of show don't tell, there will be like a handful of people that will just answer, and they'll be like, but novel writing is all about telling. And I'm like, no. You can't just say that because you're writing a novel, you have free reign to just tell your audience anything that you want to tell them at any point. You still want to make them work for it. You still want to make them come to their own conclusions about things. And as I said, so just leaving that open, that silence, she doesn't even have to acknowledge it. She can just, you can just have her storm out of the room and end the scene there. And that, I think, would be very powerful for just the readers themselves to understand that she got it, like your narrative character got it, but she's not dwelling on it, and she's not psychoanalyzing it in her head right now. She's just like out of there because it was a low blow and she's gone. And then you can move on with the story, and you don't have to, first of all, waste the amount of words that it would take to reiterate that, but coming from an editor, but you also wouldn't have to dumb it down for your readers, which is kind of the point.
Because then the psychoanalysis happens in your reader's head, which is a lot more fun. Argue, because because
then your reader can actually have the space to, especially if it's like the end of the scene, for example, they can have the space to be like, wow, she really said that, or she really didn't say anything. And it's just a lot more fun of an experience for a reader. What are your best tricks to utilizing show don't tell? So I know you've written a couple of screenplays. Have you ever like consciously thought about showing versus telling, or is that just something that you kind of just do?
I'm just naturally gifted. No, certainly something I have thought about, especially when writing dialogue. I have written things in like a first draft, because I'm a strong believer, I think, as you are, that the first draft can just be a vomit draft, like just put it out there. Everything that's on the page and not in your head anymore is good, because it opens up your brain capacity for like new scenes. Just dump everything out there, and then you can go back and edit it later, because it's something I struggled with, I think, especially when I started writing, that I thought every single sentence, everything in line needed to be perfect, and then I would just sit there for 5 hours, and after 5 hours I'd end up with 2 lines of dialogue because I kept deleting that one sentence. Just vomit everything out there, and then I would go back for the second draft and think, would someone actually say that? Is that realistic? Is that maybe a bit on the nose? 10 out of 9 times, yes, it was a bit on the nose. So then I would think about ways like, how could I make this seem more realistic? Because like we just discussed earlier, people are liars. People don't actually tell you what they feel, because I guess we don't like being vulnerable, and being honest with people is being vulnerable. So unless you're like really comfortable with someone, you tend to try to have a bit of a guard up. So yes, how can I make this seem a bit more realistic, and also don't need this line at all, like we said with Ladybird, sometimes just no line is the best line. Sometimes just let the audience or the character sit with that. Sometimes just a reaction, a frown can be so much more powerful than saying what. For dialogue, I certainly have done that. For description,
I
I
suppose
guess
it's
it's
not really a thing in screenwriting because you just set up the scene, and I suppose you do use like
yeah.
character actions. How do you handle that? It's like because I think with screenwriting it's more about like not over directing rather than not showing, I guess.
Yeah, because you also the thing with screenwriting, right? It's more of a blueprint. You are
Yeah.
writing a construction manual for whoever will actually construct the film. Because
Hmm.
more often than not, the person who wrote the script won't actually direct it. Um, so you kind of have to make sure you convey everything you wanted that to be in the film for the complete stranger, maybe who will actually take your script and then make it a real thing.
Hmm.
So you need to be descriptive enough for that to come across, but also you want it to be entertaining to read because after all, it is still a book. So you don't want the producer, developer, director, whoever will pick up the script to fall asleep because then they won't want to make
Yeah,
it a film. It still needs to be
that's true.
exciting and enticing to read. Um, do you know that the Oppenheimer script was entirely written in first person, which I found so interesting? That's so bizarre,
That is very bizarre. I
right?
do know that, but I haven't read it. But I do think um I mean that's one of those things where like when you're established you can break the rules, right?
Yeah, you have to know the rules, break the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone else probably wouldn't get away with that. You kind of need to be Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
But I completely digress. What was the question? Let's go back on track. Um,
um
Show and tell in the description.
oh
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so you do need to make it entertaining for the people who will pick it up, the people who want
Yeah.
to produce it. You have to
Yeah,
convince the
because I
producer.
think when you're writing a script you're not going to also say the emotions of the characters. Like you're not going to say, Sarah is feeling upset.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't do that.
You'd probably just sort of describe what she's doing that makes her look upset. Because obviously, when you give a script to a character and you just say Sarah's supposed to be upset, they don't know what they're supposed to do with that. Like you got to give them something to do or some kind of way to exhibit that. You can't just say be upset.
Yeah,
Like
emotions are not a
usually,
volume you can dial up and down.
yeah, exactly. Usually you'll have to give them some kind of a prompt or something that they can do a prop or use some kind of setting or something like that. Dialogue is like the first thing that comes up for me whenever I write anything. So most of my dialogue usually does actually stay the same from the first draft. If anything, I will do the same thing that you do and go back and like delete some lines.
Mm.
So my process is usually like when I do write dialogue, I either end up like separating it out a bunch. So one thing that I don't like in novels is when you just have monologues back and forth. Because like first of all, if you were doing screenwriting, you know that you can't cross a certain amount of lines with a dialogue unless it's like a monologue sort of scene, like specifically made to be a monologue. But when you're doing dialogue, it's always going to be like, you're going to have 5 lines at most in a script. Um, that they can actually have a conversation back and forth because nobody like monologues that much in real life. I mean, obviously we are right now because we're podcasting, but
Yeah, unless it's a speech or you're really angry, which I guess is also speech because,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But usually you want to make it sound like a conversation. You want to make it sound natural. So when I edit my stuff, I do it consciously now because just because I've gotten used to it, but it's always like, I think none of my dialogue has more than like 2 sentences in it unless it is meant to be a speech.
Hmm.
But 2 sentences max is what I cut it out at. And if I ever find myself writing a line that's like exceeding the threshold and getting like too long, I'm like, what are you actually trying to say here? Like you got to step away and be like, if you can make this clearer, then that's what you should do. Or you break it up and you have it a back and forth or whatever. And I think in novel writing it's easier because it doesn't even have to be a back and forth. It could just be like you have one line of dialogue and then you do a bit of description or like character action or something, or like draw out a silence or something, and then you do another line of dialogue. I usually do the dialogue first for every scene that I write without any action, without any description, literally just write out the dialogue. And I think that's because I started out doing screenwriting.
To say this is very
It's very much
scripted.
like a script. Yeah,
Yeah.
it very much it does happen like that. So I just write out the dialogue, and then I go back and fix that, and I see if I need to cut anything else out. But usually the dialogue is like the one thing in my novels, in my manuscripts that stays pretty much the same
Mm.
from the start. Um, or I cut out a few words here and there because, yeah.
It's too much. But for one, I love a good ramble. Like in Gilmore Girls when Lorelai Gilmore just has her monologues, and it's just really funny because also fast paced. Or in Scream Queens, a good Chanel Oberlin roast that just goes on for half a minute. I think that can't be underestimated. That is great comedic value.
Yeah.
The issue is it only really works, I guess, for screen because if you have to end a novel and turn the page, it's just like an entire page. It's just one person talking. That's probably a bit daunting. But if it's on the screen, if it's by a good actor, that can actually work. That can add a lot, I think, to the scene.
Yeah, I do think it works. We were saying like Lorelai in Gilmore Girls, but I think because that works because she just does it so fast, and so does Rory, and it's like all of the actors there when they do have like really long lines and make it seem like they're actually really short lines, but they're not. They just talk very fast. Hello, listener. It's time for us to judge a book by its cover. Have we got what it takes to uncover the true story without looking at its pages? Well, let's find out. All right, so today we have chosen the book called The Burial Plot by Elizabeth McNeil. Do you want to describe what you see for our readers?
I can attempt to. So there is a manor house in complete white with, Gothic style windows and all that. And it's within a Venus flytrap, which looks like a heart. So that's quite telling. Mm-hmm. So I guess the manor is the bait. And
there are snakes also.
Oh yeah, the snakes. Right? A very Garden of Eden, maybe. Mm-hmm. There's a spider web with a spider in the left corner. Mm-hmm. In the middle, there's also a river, and there's a girl who is in, I guess, Victorian dress, and she is in the river, and she's also in the O, which I guess is just graphic design. I don't think that means anything. So a lot of water lilies around her. And yeah, she's headed towards the Venus flytrap / house.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks really ominous. There's a lot going on in the actual picture. That's just why I picked it. So
a moth on the right side, which is usually a sign for decay, right? So that's not good. Is that a leopard there? A sleeping leopard?
Where?
There, next to B?
Don't know, maybe. Because I can't tell. The thing is, this cover looks really like tropical, but then there's like a Gothic house, and I don't know whether that's... I mean, maybe it is set, because that might be like...
colonialism?
Potentially. I don't know. But anyway, I don't know where this is set. I don't know anything about it. We just have the title, The Burial Plot, and it says she wants him, he'll take everything.
I see. Okay, so the heart-shaped Venus flytrap makes sense.
So she's really attracted to this dude because he has this awesome house, but really the house is a trap, and she's gonna have to escape because he's gonna trap her. That's my analysis. What do you think is gonna happen?
Immediately blaming her. Great.
I'm not. He's the bad guy.
You said she's a gold digger.
Well, everyone has faults.
Like, this is what you get. I mean, could be that. Considering she has, considering she's dressed like a Victorian era girl, right? I think maybe she doesn't really have a choice in the matter of who she marries.
Oh.
Because they just got flocked off to the highest bidder, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe she genuinely fell in love, and he kind of just took her as his prize, like a trophy, because that's kind of what men did back then. As if they stopped doing that, but back then you had to pay a dowry and everything, so it was literally a purchase, and then the woman belonged to you. So maybe she stupidly fell in love with this guy. She thinks he's really handsome. Why handsome? She thinks he's really great. Has honest feelings. And he just completely takes her for granted, abuses her, and locks her into his beautiful mansion, and then just uses her as his prize. And yeah.
Sounds great.
I know.
I
right?
love how every time we do this book cover judging thing, it always somehow is very, very morbid. Right, so we agree that it's a historical novel. And yeah, judging by the sort of the layout of the, I guess, the nature and stuff, it does feel like it might be set maybe in a Latin country or something.
The Caribbean or something, yeah. Also, like, none of the animals we see are good omens, because like snakes, not great. A snake pit, not a good place. The spider web, also, she gets tangled in the spider web. And the moth, like we said, death. So, yeah.
Are there any other animals?
Well, the cat, the wild cat.
I don't think that's a cat. I think that's just flowers. But anyway, I can't really see it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's all the elements. And the only thing is the name of the author is Elizabeth McNeil, so that screams like I don't know, Irish or something. But I suppose the burial plot, what is the title?
Yeah,
scream to you. That's the thing, because the burial plot is basically like, it's where you get buried, your family plot at the graveyard. Which obviously death is going to be a huge theme in this book.
What if she is the rich one? What if it's her house and like he comes for her inheritance?
He comes for her inheritance?
Yeah, because she wants him. As in, like, she, like a Titanic situation. She fell in love with this really charming, smitten guy, and his plan is to just kill them all.
So kind of like Saltburn.
Kind of like Saltburn, yeah, exactly. To take everything.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the house is in the heart-shaped Venus flytrap, right? So her falling in love is the trap.
Maybe. I don't know. I still, she's probably going to have to find her way out of the house or something. Because it gives me very much like, I don't know if you've read, you probably haven't, Mexican Gothic. Like, I read that, and that was basically about a woman, I think she was going to care for her sister or something, who got stuck in this house, and then basically she also got stuck in the house because it's a haunted house, blah 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 blah. But oh yeah, spoiler alert. she had to make her way out of it. So it kind of gives me those kind of vibes. The only thing that I'm not like 100% sure about is, why is it called the burial plot? Like, how does that factor into the significance of what we're seeing here? The burial plot, like, is it a kind of till death do us part, and so he'll take everything, including her final resting place or something? I don't know.
Oh, so you're going to like a Gothic haunted mansion kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the kind of vibes I'm getting, but also, yeah, it definitely gives me like jungle vibes. I don't know. From the best-selling author of The Doll Factory, The Burial Plot is an unstoppable historical thriller about murder, manipulation, and a young woman trying to wrestle power from the hands of a dangerous man. But he's always one step ahead. It's in London? Interesting. That's an interesting setting, considering the whole layout. I guess
it could just be like a garden, a botanical garden.
Yeah, I guess. 1839, where the cemeteries are full. Oh, okay. And there is money to be made in death. Wow.
Grave diggers? Is that where we're going?
Bonnie and Crawford lead a life of trickery, surviving off ill-gotten coin and nefarious schemes. But one hot evening, their luck runs out. A man lies in a pool of blood at Bonnie's feet, and now she needs to disappear. Crawford secures her a position as lady's maid in a grand house on the Thames, still deep in mourning for its late mistress. Oh, okay. So it is kind of like Rebecca. As Bonnie comes to understand this family, the eccentric Mr. Moncrief, I don't think that's how you say it.
That sounds very English, yes. That's probably how I pronounce it.
Obsessively drawing mausoleums grand enough for his dead wife. Jeez. And their peculiar daughter, Sissy, scribbling imaginary love letters to herself from the mysterious Lord Duggan. She begins to question what really happened to Mrs. Moncrief, and whether her own presence here was planned from the beginning, because Crawford is watching, and perhaps he is plotting his greatest trick yet. I actually really want to read that.
Yeah, that sounds quite twisty.
But so we were way off. Well, we weren't way off. I think we got a couple of details right. It definitely feels like Rebecca, but like amped up a notch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the protagonist is a criminal, I guess. That I was not expecting.
Yeah, also she's not a gold digger. Well, she literally is a gold digger, but
she literally. Hey listener, we're about to answer some audience questions. Did you know you could submit questions every month to be answered right here on the Plotcast? You can do this by following my Instagram account at @Plottery and keeping an eye on my end of month Q&A boxes in my Instagram stories. make sure to submit a good one, and we might answer it on the next episode. All right, let's get back into it. All right.
Cool.
We will move on to a couple of listener questions. I think I'm going to start with the second one because that one seems easier, and I think the first one we will blabber on about. But the second one is how to balance action and reflection in a chapter. Well, it depends what you're writing in the chapter, what the purpose of the chapter is, because sometimes you will inevitably have chapters that are like more action-paced and like there's a lot more stuff happening, so you need to describe the stuff that's happening. But then you might have more of an internal chapter that is more of like a reactionary chapter, I guess, is what you would call it.
I mean, I'm here for the screenwriting point of view, right? And I don't really think you have the same issue in a script because there's not much reflection going on, I suppose, because you do want it to be action constantly. I mean, obviously the characters should reflect on their actions, but you wouldn't necessarily have a scene of someone just sitting in the dark room thinking about what they've just done. You kind of need to bring that across in an action they do, that they feel guilty or sad or whatever. So you can't really have them just reflect on something unless you maybe have like a voiceover, like, I don't know, Fleabag or Awkward, where they literally tell you these are my thoughts. That could work. But even that, I would say use it sporadically, because no one, or like in you know, because it just gets a bit awkward when he's just staring there and you hear his voice over, and you just feel like, what would this feel like for the people in the scene with him if he's just looking at you and you hear his internal monologue for half an hour? So sporadically, more action than reflection.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And I think in novel writing, what's important is to think about pacing, because when you write a lot of internal monologue, that inevitably slows down the scene, and you should use it at points where it's like, we need a break here. Like, we need a break from what's actually happening. We need a break from the dialogue or whatever. You need to slow down the pacing, and that's when you would resort to doing a couple of thoughts from your character and just telling us what's going on inside their head. But equally, if you do actually need a thought, like you need them to acknowledge something and it is an action scene, you wouldn't go in to like a page-long rant about what's going on in their head. You would probably give us like a sentence or two maximum. So I do think it's very closely tied to pacing of the scene, and of the chapter and what actually is happening. Because you have books like Crime and Punishment, which are just internal monologue, right? So it does really depend on like the style and the character, the narrative voice that you're going for. But for your average novel, definitely just,
I think it also really helps. Maybe that's just a personal preference, but I love when the reflection is like a dialogue. You know, when it's more like, I know, I say, I'm fine, and then the description says that was a lie. Like, if it's more like that, or like Crime and Punishment, which is where we just said it is a lot of reflection going on, but he's funny, you know. You can read it because he is just so, I guess, cynical and witty with it.
Well, it's about the narrator's voice, obviously.
Yes, I guess so. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is the reflection, you can add more reflection if it is more conversational, I think. Does that make any sense? Is that helpful?
I get it, because it's like, it's internal monologue. It's literally monologue. It's not like somebody trying to explain things to you. It is just you getting access to some of their unfiltered thoughts. I like to do this with like rhetorical questions or like responses to, I do this a lot actually. And you would know if you'd read my book.
I did. That's why I thought about it.
Oh, did you?
Yes, because a few pages where it's not, you're not in the head of anyone, right? But you still present it like it was dialogue. It's like, but was she? What did she?
Yeah.
She wished her dream came true, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I think that's good.
Yeah, I quite like that. So I think that actually kind of ties back to what we talked about, the power of silence. But I quite like the idea of when you have a character talking, and your narrative character isn't saying anything. I sometimes do this thing where I will have them respond, but they only respond in their thoughts, so they're not actually saying it, but you get to hear what they're saying back to the actual dialogue that's being spoken. And you will come across this in my book because I do that a lot. But yeah, I really like doing it that way. So it's more like entertaining to read, and it's rather than just having like a whole big paragraph of like, this is what I think about this situation. You just kind of tell them and you move on, and it doesn't have to be massive.
Yeah.
which again ties back into show don't tell. Like, you know, if you can use one sentence, like you said, that was a lie, you don't have to keep explaining that she lied or whatever.
Comma because
actually I did blah, 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 blah. But yeah, if you can do something with one simple sentence, then you don't need anymore. That is like my basic editing principle.
Less is more.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and the second question is, how do you stay committed to writing and do it consistently?
I struggle with that a bit, not gonna lie. Maybe because I don't take the Plottery's advice as serious as I should.
Yeah.
So guys, don't be like me. Follow her advice. I think the best way to do it is a little goes a long way. I think that's my principle. I just like to think, okay, let's just dump some stuff on the page and then we can revisit it later. Maybe we'll erase all of it. Some of it will be usable. And then we already have half a scene or half a chapter, and that's already more than we had when we started, right?
Yeah.
So a win, take the win. So yeah, I think that always helps me, where it's just like, let's just dump something on the page and then we'll see. We'll take it from there, one step at a time, even tiny steps get you there eventually.
Yeah, that's nice. And I quite like what you kind of implied it. You didn't really say it, but it's kind of like not having goals. So like you don't sit down with the goal of, I'm going to write 2,000 words right now, or I'm going to, finish this chapter. I'm going to finish this entire script in 2 days or something like that. Because I think that's where most writers start to develop writer's block, because when you set those sort of precedents and that kind of pressure, and then you don't accomplish it, because inevitably humans are very ambitious and we think we can do more than we actually can. And then we'll sit down and we'll see, oh, someone said online that they wrote 2,000 words, so I'm going to sit down and write 2,000 words. And then you're going to write 1,600 words and you're going to be like, I can't write the other 400 words. Why can't I write it? Probably because 1,600 is your limit. And that's okay. But what most writers will do in that situation is that they'll just beat themselves over the head for not achieving the goal that they set in the first place. And then that becomes a habit. And then you just sort of keep putting yourself down every time you don't achieve a goal. And I talk about this a lot, but that's basically what kind of gets you in a, I want to say, like a frenemy relationship with writing, which is not where you want to be.
Yeah.
Because you will fear it and you will always think like, oh no, I'm gonna fail again now that I have to write. It's probably gonna end in failure, because it always does, because I'm a failure.
I think we're spiraling a bit here. Are you okay?
I'm just trying to illustrate what I've seen happen and what I've had happen a few years ago. And it was a long way to get out of that pit. But I think I achieved it last year. But it is very much about just like changing your process, your approach to the act of writing, to be like, oh, I'm just going to write because I feel like it. And I'm just going to write because I have time and I want to do it. And not because I need to do it and I need to write 2,000 words or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's also okay not to write. If you don't feel like writing, it's like...
Yes.
I think there's also a lot of pressure people fear. It's like, no, I'm a writer, I need to write this now. Like sometimes you're just not in the mood for it. That's also fine. You're not, I know, betraying your craft because you didn't write all weekend. Sometimes you just want to do other stuff, and that's fine. We'll get back to it when you feel more like it, and that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard someone told me recently that they were like struggling, and they had a holiday coming up or like a week off, and they were like, well, I'm gonna write so much. And I've heard this and I've done this in the past, and it's never going to happen, because like you have a holiday. The holiday is to rest, right? So you don't have to like be like, oh, I have the weekend off, so because I have the time off, I have to be writing. Like that's not how it works. You are allowed to take time off and not guilt trip yourself over not writing for a little while.
Yeah.
Because that never ends well. Writer's block is very like individual for every person, and you got to kind of figure out what your actual block is. Like, why are you not committed? Why are you not doing consistently? Because some people are not committed because they just don't have passion for the project. Like they want to write, they have an inkling to write, but they just didn't take enough time to actually fall in love with their project, which is something that I do recommend everyone to do before they start writing. You need to be in love with the idea. It needs to be that kind of thing where you're like, I will die if I don't write this, or like I No, I'm serious. If you can imagine, you had like 6 months left to live, would you write this project? Would that like be a priority to get it out there? That's how passionate I think you need to be about the stories that you're telling. Like, they need to be something that you have to say before you die. Yeah, maybe extremist, but it works.
My motivation, I think, is probably not that extreme. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I think I do agree with the sentiment. If you're not passionate about it, you
probably won't write it. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Why even bother? If you don't want to do it, just don't. No one's
do
forcing you to do it. Yeah. So yeah, I do get that. What I think was my biggest issue, and why I always got writer's block, is because I wouldn't plot things out, which is kind of very your brand. No, but plotting really helps. At least it helped me a lot, because what I would used to do which is especially easy for script writing because you have so much dialogue. I would just like sit down and write a funny scene, which was good, but then it wasn't going anywhere because I didn't have a set out plot or like story. It's like, I had this fun idea, I wrote it, and then what next? Well, there's no next, so I'm not going to write anymore, right? Which obviously that's not really,
it's not sustainable.
Because it's not going anywhere. Even if you have like an end goal where you want to end up, if you don't know what's happening in the middle, then writing that middle will be near to impossible, because like, I'm not sure, where am I going here? So yeah, plotting I think is really undervalued by a lot of people still. Even though it's such a basic principle of storytelling, it's not a revolutionary
it's actually
thing.
fun fact, I came up with the plot grid because of you, I think.
Yeah.
Because we were like, I think I came up with it when we were still both in university, and I was looking at like my university classes and stuff because I was really into this module that we had about writing for TV or something, and then you were working on a TV series, like a screenplay for Frenemies, but you named it something else now, didn't you?
It's called Vultures now.
Vultures.
Yeah.
That's so much better.
I agree.
So you were working on that, and I think I was working on Hot House, and then I was like, because we were both so all over the place, and I was trying to plan out these episodes, and I'm like, how do I do it? I need this to be on one page. I need it to be like super legible. I need it to make sense. I need like a big picture overview. Yeah. And that's when I sat down and I did all of those spreadsheets and stuff for us to use. And that worked really well, I think. It
makes it so much easier. It's like like sculpting, right? Because you wouldn't start with the freckles of the sculpture. You still need to build the skeleton first, and then you just add stuff to it, and then you start decorating your base. And that's kind of what writing should be, at least in my humble opinion. Should be like, ideally too. You have your plot points, the grid that you need to reach, and then you like start padding that out. Yeah. And then once that's padded out, then you start adding, the decorations and ornaments and the jokes and all that sort of shebang. And you can attempt to do it without, the plot grid, and some people might get there, but I would argue most people won't.
Yeah, I do think like it takes experience. You have to have been writing for a while to be able to just like that story structure. So it's and it's, again, even if you do have experience, I think most people still wouldn't just sit down and write it. But well, they might, but might not be that good, and they might not finish it, I guess, is the main point.
So to reiterate, show don't tell. Always assume, I guess, your characters know everything, because your characters will know everything. They have the context, so you don't have to explain the context to your own characters. Yeah, and plot stuff out, guys. It helps a lot. Know where you're headed, and then the journey will be so much easier.
Revisions.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. Start with a skeleton, start with a rough draft, and then you can fine-tune it along the way, because that's why it's called fine-tuning.
And that's why it's called first draft and rough draft, because your first draft is not your last draft. That's kind of the point. It's in the name, guys. It's in the name.
And now being very patronizing, which is also something you shouldn't do. And this is why you show don't tell, so the audience doesn't feel like this.
That's very true. Thank you. We planned this demonstration for sure.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Plotcast. If you want more writing tips and tricks, head over to my YouTube channel. Until next time.